guess everybody knows about Samson. Didn't want to hear anything. Weren't curious about the insights. Oh, nope, I see a shadow. I see a shadow walking towards this. Oh, I think it's Karen. I'm so happy it's Karen. That's all right, well, I think we got about everybody here that we're going to get, and maybe we'll get some stragglers. We got what? One more coming up the walk. Upstairs talking to Randy. Who's coming up the walk? Okay. About to get to the door? I bet she can hear me right now. That's it. Hello. Everybody get a snack? Got that covered at least?
This is because somebody left their key in the door.
Of the church? Well, we got divine protection. We're all right. All right. Well, y'all bow your heads with me. Let's open the evening in a word of prayer. Father God, we thank you for this beautiful rainy day. We thank you for every soul you've gathered here this evening, for this church, for this country where we are able to gather freely and study your word. God, we thank you for the power that lies within your word, and we ask, God, that you would move among us this evening, that we would be built up, that we would be sanctified by what we discuss here these evenings, that the Old Testament would not be lost in its application to our lives, God, because every bit of your word is good for the edification of the believer, and we believe it. In your name we pray. Amen. So we're on Judges 14 this evening, and Judges 13 wrapped up with the angel talking to Manoah and Manoah's wife and saying, you're going to have a son. And it ends with, and the woman bare a son and called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move in him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So it kind of leaves us hanging there, doesn't it? She had a son, he started growing up, and we know that the Spirit was moving in his life, but it doesn't really tell us how, and then we kind of jump into chapter 14 with a bit of a time jump forward, because Samson is no longer a child. He's at least of the age where he's noticing women here, so we've had a good time jump of a number of years. So chapter 14, looking at the first 4 verses first. And Samson went down to Timnath, and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother, and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord that he sought an occasion against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So Samson is grown. The account skips the years of his youth and his adolescence, and it brings us straight to the first glimpse of the weakness that would eventually be Samson's downfall. Samson is known for being a womanizer, overcome with lust and with very little impulse control. Man does just whatever pops into his head to do. And he went down to the town of Timnath for whatever reason, a small town in the mountains of the land of Judah, and there he sees what I would imagine, if it's caught his eye so much, a beautiful Philistine woman. They don't talk. He doesn't meet her. That would be frowned upon even in the Philistine culture, but he sees her, and the image of her captures his mind, and he dwells on her. He just can't get her out of his head. And he goes back home and he tells his parents that he's seen a Philistine woman and he's just on fire for her, and it's love at first sight, and he's just got to have her as a wife. We don't know. We don't know exactly. I don't think 12. I don't know. Surely not. He's old enough to notice women and to knock a few heads together in a little bit here. So 20? I don't know. So he can't go to her and begin courtship in this culture. That's left to the parents. So Samson is begging his parents to get the process started. Go to the family. Start this courtship. Let them know that I'm interested. Start talking over numbers. See if we can't get this ball rolling. But they're reluctant because that goes against Hebrew law. And how are they supposed to be raising Samson? Starts Nazirite. He's a Nazirite. Exodus 34:15-16 says, "Do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you take some of their daughters as brides for your sons, their daughters will prostitute themselves to their gods and cause your sons to do the same." Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 3 says, "Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you." What Samson was asking of his parents was against the law of God. And even though he's grown now, his parents have not forgotten the messenger of God that bid them repeatedly to raise Samson as a Nazirite, as a man set apart for God's service. Don't let him drink wine. Don't let him have strong drink. Don't eat any products of the vine. Don't let him touch any dead bodies or anything that would make him unclean. Don't cut his hair. Don't let a razor touch his head. He was special. And that angel, if you remember, disappeared from their presence by ascending into heaven on the flames of the burning sacrifice that they had offered. I don't imagine that's an impression that fades over 15, 20 years for however old Samson is. So here, when Samson is just begging them to get a wife from among the Philistines, they really, really don't want to do it. The Philistines are pagans. They worship Dagon, a made-up half-fish god. That's the one, and we aren't to it yet, but we'll get to it eventually. When the Ark of the Covenant is captured by the Philistines, they plant it in the same room with Dagon. He's this half-fish god, quotation marks, creature. And when they go and check on him the next day, make sure that Dagon's still there, they find that he's broken off at the feet and laid over because Dagon would not be able to stand in the presence of God in the Ark of the Covenant there. That's who they worship. They are an unclean people. And Samson doesn't know this girl. He's just seen her. He has no reason to think that she's any kind of exception to the culture, that out of all of her people, she's the only one that's moral or wiser or kind or obedient or that she's found God somehow in this pagan society. And on top of all that, I love this too. Look in verse 3 again. "Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines?" Does that not sound like this again? Will you never find a woman of your own kind? Their response makes it sound like Samson's eye kind of tends towards foreign women. Like this is not the first time that he's come to his parents and said, "Mom, Dad, you're not going to believe what I saw today." A pagan woman, and she was wearing this really skimpy top, and she had tattoos and piercings and heavy eye makeup, and she was eating bacon and just living the life, and I just got to have her. She's back. There we go. That would be very much against the Jewish code. Yeah. All right. Oh. It sounds like to Samson's parents, like this is it Tuesday again? Another girl? Samson found another girl that's caught his eye, but this one's different. Samson is especially interested in this one, so much so that he eventually wears down his parents, and they relent, and they go talk to the family. Now, the author relates the notion to us in the best way he can that this weakness of Samson, this sin, was not condoned, mind you, intermarrying with the pagan races, the kind of lust that was completely dominating his mind, is not condoned by God, but it was being used by God to bring Samson into conflict with the Philistines who had been oppressing Israel for 40 years. So God didn't place this lust in Samson's mind. He didn't weaken the resolve of Samson's parents to acquiesce to the courtship of what would be a sinful marriage. The author is saying that God used their disobedience in a way that furthered God's own design. Verses 5 and 6. Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. So we don't get all of the details here, but it looks like Samson and his parents make the journey to Timnath. Verse 5, it's kind of a confusing translation, but it's not describing the events of a single outing. The three of them went down to Timnath, and they stayed there for a time. So it's not like he went with his parents and then on the way encountered a lion. They went down to Timnath. Samson didn't stay by their sides the whole time, though. He's grown. He goes out walking, exploring, wandering, whatever he does to pass the time. And while his parents are trying to work out the logistics of a marriage and a dowry and probably even accommodate whatever pagan marital practices are being forced upon him by the Philistines, in one of those wanderings, Samson is strolling through the vineyards of Timnath, and a young lion attacks him. And I know, we all know what lions are, but we only ever see them in zoos or on TV or on the internet, and we lose something of the scale of how big a lion is in those mediums here. Lions are ginormous. They can get up to 550 pounds, and they have giant heads filled with rows of teeth and paws, kid you not, like frying pans with giant curved claws on them. So even if this is a young lion, it's 300, 400 pounds. But these things are killers. They're not just large cats. They're gigantic cats with razor-sharp claws. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson, and he rent the lion as he would have rent a kid. You know what rent means? Tear. To tear apart, like pulled pork. Like when it comes out of the oven and they got those black gloves on the internet and they start like pulling it apart like that. Samson was gifted strength by God to tear apart this lion like one would tear apart a piece of goat meat. Rent him like a kid. No weapon, no sword, no club, no knife, just his bare hands and the empowerment of God, and he was able to tear a lion apart and leave its body by the wayside. And he's oddly humble about the feat of strength. He doesn't tell his parents at all, and not because they would give him an earful or complain or anything. He just survived a lion attack. People don't survive lion attacks. That's a form of execution even. He didn't seek it out. He wasn't hunting. He was just walking through a vineyard, so they'd be elated to hear that God had blessed Samson in such a way. So for whatever reason, I don't know, he doesn't tell his parents, though. You would think? I don't know. Depends on how long he's gone. Wash himself off a little bit. Fountain, well, maybe.
You would think that would be horribly messy. You would think he would be covered.
I don't know. How many times have your boys come home dirty?
Plenty of time to clean up and clothes, buddy, before he got back to his parents.
His mother would know.
Little dab behind the ear. Missed a little spot. Verses 7 through 9. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hands, and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Samson finally gets the chance to meet and talk to the woman that he's been obsessing about this whole time. And good for him, and he likes her. This would have been an awful waste of time if he met her and found out she was annoying or depressing to talk to or something like that, because he's made it to the talking stage with this woman, which means the betrothal process has begun. But they talk, and she pleased Samson in their supervised conversation, so everything's looking good. Now it says in verse 8, and after a time he returned to take her. Now, we're not told exactly how long that is, but it was probably a year later. She would have been staying at her own father's house during the courtship period with occasional visits from Samson, and now that the period of time has elapsed, he's returning to her family's house to enjoy the marriage feast and take his bride back to live with him in his own city. And on that trip back to her, Samson decided to stop by the scene of his lion attack. Maybe, pure curiosity. Maybe he wants to grab some teeth and make a necklace or something like that. I don't know. But he goes to where he was attacked by a lion. And what does he find? A honeycomb. In the lion's remains, there is now a honeycomb and a swarm of bees. And the word that's used here it's translated there as carcass. And in some translations, you'll see that. But truly, a better word for that would be skeleton. Bees don't nest in carcasses. Not through any bee behavior that we have seen. They like drier structures. They would have no problem colonizing in a set of bones. It's another reason that scholars think that this is probably a full year later. The body of the lion has decomposed. It's dried out under the Middle Eastern sun. It's just been bleached. It's nothing but skin and bones housing a beehive. It's still unclean, but it's not quite the detestable image that comes to mind that we might conjure if we think of Samson pulling a honeycomb from a relatively fresh lion carcass and just eating it as he walks merrily along. That's disgusting. It's slightly more palatable to think it was bees in a skeleton and just a dried out, no flesh on it kind of structure. Now, we're not told directly either that Samson sinned in doing this. If he handled the carcass or if it was just a skeleton, then yeah, he would have technically broken his Nazirite vow there if he was handling the dead body of something. Josephus, the Jewish historian, says that Samson took specifically 3 honeycombs and was able to do it without touching the carcass and was technically within the bounds of Jewish law. How does he know that? I don't know, but that's what Jewish tradition says about it. So they, for whatever reason, are holding to the thought that Samson has still not yet broken his Nazirite vow.
It wasn't that the lion was unclean, it was that it was dead.
Dead, yes. Now, it wouldn't shock me either way. It wouldn't shock me if he was trying to find some kind of loophole or if he just didn't care at all. I can see Samson, thinking this is a good deal either way, though there's free honey and I'm going in, and I feel like I'm smart for taking advantage of like that, and I can picture him doing it both ways. But he has to know that even if he technically can take the honey and not be declared unclean, it's gray area because he intentionally doesn't tell his parents where he got the honey because they would have refused to eat it. So he might have had a little harder time convincing them of that loophole that he thought he had found here. Verses 10 through 14. So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. And it came to pass when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. But if ye cannot declare it to me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. This is the wedding feast. The time for the wedding feast has arrived. We don't know what verse 10 means exactly, if it's describing some custom for the father to meet or escort the bride or some such action. It doesn't really matter. When the family of the bride saw Samson approaching, the subtext here is that they were concerned that he was alone. He didn't have a wedding party of his own, and this is maybe because the wedding was not condoned by his own people, and he didn't have any friends willing to come down and party with him while he marries the daughter of their enemies, the people that have been oppressing them for 40 years. He's marrying into that culture. So they bring Samson some friends to celebrate with him. They bring him 30 brand new Philistine buddies. And at some point he decides, he says, you know what, let's pose a riddle. And it's not weird for them to pose a riddle. It's weird to us, but it's not weird to them. It's a custom, it's entertainment, it's part of the festivities to liven things up and keep people engaged. I know if I were at a wedding and somebody ever stood up and said, hey, here's a riddle, I'd think that was weird and awkward. But back then, what else are they going to do? They don't have slideshows. They don't have a DJ. We get to stand up and riddle, maybe a song and a dance. Samson tells his friends that if they can solve his riddle within the 7 days of the wedding feast, he will give every one of them a fine linen cloth and a new set of robes. And if they can't solve the riddle, then each one of them has to give him the same thing. And that may not seem like high stakes, but people didn't have walk-in closets like we do today. They didn't have closets in general like that. Being able to change clothes with any regularity was a sign of wealth. And these 30 guys aren't a bunch of wealthy guys for hire. They're professional party goers. If they lose, they're either cutting their wardrobe in half to give one of their own robes, or they're flat out giving the robe off of their back to pay up. But they agree to the stakes, and Samson poses this riddle to them. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And we obviously all know what it means, but the wedding party has no clue, because that's wildly vague. That could be absolutely anything. Samson's parents didn't even know. He intentionally didn't tell them. Samson alone is the only person who has the answer. And the 30 Philistines tried for 3 days to figure it out, but they couldn't. And after 3 days, the wedding feast is about half over. So things are getting really serious. These guys are about to have to pay up. Verses 15 through 17. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice thy husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, Thou dost but hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it thee? And she wept before him the 7 days, while their feast lasted. And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him. And she told the riddle to the children of her people. So be careful the timeline here. By context there, they spoke to Samson's wife on day 1. They didn't waste any time. And they probably gave her a pretty hard time about it, because it says that she was crying all 7 days of the feast. So instead of being overjoyed and happy that she's getting married, Samson keeps finding his bride crying and sad, and I imagine that upsets him a little bit. It would upset me a little bit. And then on day 7, crunch time, the Philistines, these 30 Philistine friends, go up to Samson's wife and tell her, you better get the answer today, out of your husband, or we're going to kill you and we're going to burn your house down. Did you just invite us to this wedding to take from us, to plunder what we have? And the fact that they repeat it right there, is it not so? That's emphatic. They're saying this really is the case. You only hired us to come here. You don't care about him having friends. You just wanted to get some robes off of us. And so in verse 16, Samson's wife goes to him and she really lays it on thick. You don't love me. This marriage is off to a great start. You won't share. We never talk. And Samson says, share? I haven't even told my parents about this. I've known them all my life. I'm not singling you out. I love my parents. I haven't told them a word. And I've just met you, honestly. We only just started speaking 7 days ago. But she lay sore upon him. She grievously troubled him.
Tell your wife I haven't told my parents. Why would I tell you that?
Well,
It doesn't work too well.
I'm going to go pray to my fish god about you. And so he tells her. And as soon as he tells her, she turns around and she tells the 30 Philistine partygoers. And you can imagine this doesn't end well. Verses 18 through 20. And the men of the city said unto him on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, and slew 30 men of them, and took their spoil, and gave change of garments unto them which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. So right in the nick of time, before the sun goes down on the 7th day, the 30 Philistines, they approach Samson and they give him an answer. And they didn't just run in and say, lion, it's a lion. You found a honeycomb inside of a lion. They swagger in there and they tell him an answer in the same kind of cocky, poetic fashion in which the riddle had been given. What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion? And the timing is just too coincidental. Samson's not buying it. 7 days of crying from his wife, and when he finally tells her magically all the Philistines know, Samson knows exactly what's going on. And he tells them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle.
He didn't have a way of words, did he?
Isn't there wonderful wisdom in the Old Testament? Now, some scholars take this phrase as an accusation of adultery from Samson because that is some aggressive language, but it's not. Nor does he act after the fact as though he believed she was truly guilty of adultery. That would have even been worse than what he does here. What he's saying is, if you had not worked with my wife to dig up the truth as one would work with a heifer to plow up the ground, then you wouldn't have figured out my riddle. He's accusing them of using her. And he's already been angry this whole week at this, this sad progression of his wedding feast. This tears it. This is the last straw. So he goes out to make good on his part of the bet so that he can pay up. And he doesn't have 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments handy on him. Obviously he doesn't. But once again, the Spirit of the Lord descends on Samson. God uses him to further exacerbate relations between the Israelites and the Philistines, to punish the Philistines, not specifically for anything that was done at the wedding, but for their general wickedness, their pagan idolatry here. God had been, as the author says, looking for an excuse to ramp up this kind of a conflict. So the time for their judgment has come, and God is using Samson as his instrument to carry out the punishment of the Philistines. Samson travels over to Ashkelon, which is one of the 5 major cities of the Philistines. And apparently he crashed a party of some kind, because how else are you going to find 30 Philistine men gathered together, and they're all wearing the kind of fine clothing that he specifically needs to satisfy the wager. And given the implied speed of his departure and return, the men are probably all together in one place. So I imagine he may have even crashed another wedding. I don't know. But he found a whole bunch of people well-dressed together, killed them all in the spirit of the Lord, and then took the plunder from them to pay off his bet. Samson killed 30 grown men. 30 grown men who obviously didn't want to be killed. I know that's obvious, but Samson was empowered just as he had been empowered to tear the lion. He made quick work of the men, gathered their spoil, and gave it to 30 Philistine party goers who solved the riddle, and apparently they had no idea where he had gotten the clothes. So Samson, after that, angrily goes back to his own father's house, leaves his bride behind, apparently never consummating the marriage either, because that typically happens after the 7-day wedding feast, sometimes at the very first day, and then they celebrate afterward, but most of the time it's on the 7th day. But he never formally is married to this woman, and with the marriage ended before it ever really begins, Samson's wife was given to the groomsman, the best man of his wedding, the chief of the 30 friends, the Philistine friends that had been gathered together for his wedding party. That's what that means in the last verse there. They gave him to somebody that Samson has used as a friend. Judges 15. Looking at the first 3 verses. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid, and he said, I will go into my wife into the chamber, but her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hast utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. And Samson said concerning them, Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. We don't know how long after the wedding. Sometime. That could be a number of days. That could be weeks, but we don't really know. Sometime after that wedding slaughter and the whole unpleasant event, Samson's temper died down. He forgot or set aside his wife's betrayal in giving the answer to his riddle to everybody else, and he decided to go back and consummate the marriage, let bygones be bygones, and he even brought a goat to patch things up. As the key to a healthy marriage is compromise and communication and a short memory and goat meat, apparently. But what happens? Her father stopped him dead in his tracks. I said, listen, Samson, I really thought you weren't going through with this whole thing. The way you left, I thought you really hated her. I thought you were never coming back, so I gave her to be the wife of the best man at your wedding. But all's not lost. Look, she's got a sister, and the sister's even prettier. And Samson says, it's on. That's it. I am completely blameless in what I am about to do. That's what the last bit of that verse in verse 3 says. Verses 4 and 5. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took firebrands, and turned tail to tail, and put a firebrand in the midst between 2 tails. And when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines, and burnt up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and olives. The word that's used here that's translated as foxes is shualim. And that word can mean foxes, and it can mean jackals. And it's much more likely that it means jackals here. Why do I say that? Because if absolutely nothing else, jackals travel in packs, and foxes live alone for the most part. And I'm not saying it's impossible. God could have lined up 300 foxes just like he marched animals onto the ark. But absent God's divine intervention, it would be so much easier for Samson to descend on packs of wild dogs and capture 300 of them, multiples at a time, than it would be for him to lay a whole bunch of traps and snares through the Philistine countryside, capturing foxes one at a time. Now, it's not impossible, again, but the word can mean foxes or jackals, so I'm tending towards jackal here. Regardless of the animal, he had 300 of them. He tied their tails together 2 by 2 with torches in between them. So they were motivated to run, but they were less able to do it efficiently because instead of darting off in one direction, if they were alone, they would have to linger long enough, fighting the other one, going back and forth in direction, and those torches would be easier able to catch things on fire. So he let 150 pairs of torched up jackals loose all over, and he burned down the piled up corn that had been harvested. He burned the standing corn, the vineyards, and the olive groves. It's a whole countryside enveloped in flame, a wildfire similar to what you would see on TV raging, through the panhandle, through California, where you just see massive, and they quote you, thousands of acres are on fire right now, and it's only 12% controlled or whatnot. It's a fire about that. It's a big deal. It wasn't just one guy's ranch that burned down, or he burned down some individual's farm. He burned a whole bunch of Philistine land. Verses 6 through 8. Then the Philistines said, "Who hath done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. And Samson said unto them, "Though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease." And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. And he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Edom. I wish we had more detail in some of these sections here, because they just keep hitting like the high points over and over, just a few beats are left out. And I think it would be really neat to know some of the detail here, because we don't know, first off, we don't know exactly who the Philistines are talking to. It's talking about them collectively. The Philistines said, "Who hath done this here?" Well, so it's a group of Philistines. Maybe the landowners, maybe the elders of the city, something like that. We don't know who it was, and we don't know who exactly they were talking to. They may have been speaking to other Philistines of the area, just gathering what rumors they could, or maybe they went down and rounded up some of the Israelites. Since the Israelites were the most likely culprits, because the Philistines were still oppressing, they were still the overlords of the Israelites here. And if it were Israelites, then I imagine they questioned them pretty hard. Because burning crops is a severe action. That can cripple a culture. It's a long time before things get back to normal and people are getting fed. Corn grows quickly, but olive trees, groves, not so much. So whoever they questioned, they got to the bottom of things pretty quick. Everybody says it was Samson, and he did it, and we know exactly why he did it. His father-in-law, the Timnite, gave Samson's wife to his Philistine groomsmen. So in response, the Philistines went to the home of the Timnite, and they burned him and his daughter with fire. And that's interesting for a couple of reasons, because one, it means the Philistines blamed her and her father for some part in the burning of their fields and vineyards. So either they felt she and her father should be punished for the wife swapping they did, or they were just really angry and couldn't find Samson yet, so their anger was pointed at the only person that they could get their hands on, and that was Samson's wife and her father. But secondly, the threat of being burned with fire is what caused her to betray Samson to begin with. It's what set this whole thing in the works. They couldn't figure out the riddle, and on the 7th night of the wedding feast, they really pressed her to butter up her husband and get the answer, because they were going to burn her with fire. And she said, "Boy, that sounds bad. I don't want to get burned up with fire, so I'll get the answer." But guess what? It still happened. She still got burned with fire. This thing that she was trying to avoid the whole time still happened. Now, Samson, when he hears what has happened, speaking to no Philistine in particular, says even though they have enacted their own kind of vengeance, it's not enough. Samson intends to seek justice for what's been done to his wife, because that justice on her was not theirs to enact. That was Samson's. So he decides that he's going to be the one to get the last word on this matter. And Samson finds the Philistines that killed his wife and her father, and he slaughters them with a great slaughter. Leg upon thigh is the literal translation, and we have no idea what that really means. It sounds gruesome. It's an expression that we don't have any context for except to just know that it conveys extreme violence. And then after this slaughter of however many men, he went and he dwelt in a cave in Edom. Verses 9 through 13. Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. And the men of Judah said, Why are ye come up against us? And they answered, To bind Samson are we come up, to do to him as he hath done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Edom and said to Samson, Knowest thou not that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that thou hast done unto us? And he said unto them, As they did unto me, so have I done unto them. And they said unto him, We are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hand of the Philistines. And Samson said unto them, Swear unto me that ye will not fall upon me yourselves. And they spake unto him, saying, No, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand. But surely we will not kill thee. And they bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. So the Philistines are seeking to have their own last word on the matter. After the great slaughter, the hip and thigh slaughter, and then Samson just absconded and went off to live in a cave. So they gathered together and they camped in a place that was eventually called Lehi. Remember that. Now, seeing their gathering, the men of Judah approached the Philistine camp and they asked them, Why are you here? What exactly is the occasion for which you have gathered yourselves and made ready for war and planted yourself right in our own backyard here? Because Samson was not of the tribe of Judah. And the Judahites seem like they're pretty content to maintain the status quo and make sure the Philistines weren't there to cause them any trouble. And the Philistines tell the men of Judah they've come for Samson. They're going to bind him, they're going to take him into custody and do all manner of malicious things to him to punish him for the fields and the great slaughter of their brethren. And the 3,000 men of Judah say, Well, he's not one of us. Let's gather up some men and go get him. So 3,000 men of Judah go together, they band together and they go to the cave where Samson is dwelling to straighten things out. And they've probably asked around. Maybe they've heard some rumors about Samson. He killed 30 Philistines for a bet at his own wedding party, and just the other day wiped out a bunch of people in a great slaughter. Guys, I'm talking hip and thigh, he was killing people. So it looks like they're thinking if they go after this guy, they better come loaded for bear, because their intention is to deliver him over to the Philistines. So they get together 3,000 men. They could restore peace, and it was only going to cost them the life of a stranger from another tribe, not one of their own. They had no problem with that. So they go to Samson, 3,000 strong, and they say, What's the big idea? Don't you know that the Philistines are our rulers? Now, Gideon toppled a nation with a fraction of 3,000 men, nowhere near that amount. And instead of joining with Samson, they seek to bind him and deliver him into the hand of their oppressors. It's just a sad state of affairs. We're not so far removed from the Israelites being empowered in small numbers through the might of God to go and overturn their own oppressors. And now 3,000 men are going together to try and persuade Samson to tone it down and be handed over, because even 3,000 strong, we've got no chance against the Philistines here. Again, it's just sad. But Samson tells them, whatever I did to those men, they had it coming. And they tell Samson flat out, listen, everything would be better if you just let us take you in. We're going to bind you, we're going to hand you over to them. And Samson agrees, as long as the men of Judah don't try and start anything. He says, I'll go with you as long as y'all don't attack me. And we can only take that to mean that he had no ill will towards the men of Judah. He wasn't opposed to being handed over to the Philistines because he obviously felt that God would deliver them into his hands, but he didn't want to have to hurt any Israelites in all of this. So he's either telling these people, like, don't mess with me while you're taking me to them, or he's saying, don't mess with me after the fight with the Philistines starts, because once you cross that line, you may well be given over into my hands along with the Philistines here. So y'all just, whatever happens, y'all stay out of this, and I'll go to the Philistines with you. And the men of Judah, they agree, and they swore they would do him no harm. They bound Samson with 2 new cords, and they led Samson to the Philistine camp as a lamb to the slaughter. They're going to turn him over to be killed. Verses 14 through 17. And when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And you know something's going to happen when you see that phrase. And the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a new jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand, and took it, and slew 1,000 men therewith. And Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking, that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand, and called that place Ramoth Lehi. Samson approaches the Philistine camp. He's being led, bound, and helpless by 3,000 men of Judah, or at the least a handful of representatives from the 3,000 men of Judah. And the Philistines see him coming, and they start shouting. And it's not a war cry. It's not a curse. They're not taunting him. It's a shout of victory. The verb that's actually used here in the Old Testament is heirio, which is an onomatopoeia. Y'all know what onomatopoeia means? It's a word that sounds like the word, like hurrah or boom. They're saying, heirio, hey, all right, hip, hip, hooray, here comes Samson. It's a word that conveys the sound itself, and they're cheering that the great Samson has been delivered into their hands to see justice. But then what happens? The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson, and those strong new cords that they had used to bind his hands seemed as burnt, dried up flax, and Samson easily broke from his bonds, and he grabbed up the jawbone of a donkey. And they translate it as new here. The word used, it's literally moist. He grabbed a moist jawbone. And all of that to say, it's not some old brittle jawbone that's just going to break as soon as he whacks a Philistine with it. It's a fresh jawbone from a fresh donkey corpse, and he used that bone to slay a whole bunch of Philistines. Now, was it really 1,000? I have no idea. It says 1,000, but it also says that Samson says it was 1,000. He says heaps upon heaps, so I'm sure it was hundreds. But the number 1,000 is given by Samson, and I don't know if he was keeping count while he was going through and killing people with the jawbone of an ass. Maybe he was. Maybe it's a ballpark. Maybe it was way more than 1,000, but he just rounded it off like that. Either way, he killed a whole bunch of Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. And when he finished, he got rid of the jawbone, and he named the place Ramoth Lehi. Ramoth meaning the lifting, and Lehi meaning jawbone. It's saying that when he was done, he lifted up the jawbone and he threw it away. Verses 18 through 20. Yeah.
You probably don't know, but probably none of us knows this. But how would he kill people with the jawbone?
Of a donkey? I mean, it's a long, sharp bone.
Did he stab him or just hit him so hard it killed him?
It would have a cutting edge to it, dried off. I mean, it's thin. It's like, I look at my dad, because I'm sure you've seen a dead donkey in your time.
He had animal bones laying around. It would have teeth.
It would have teeth. I picture it like a relatively small club with teeth and maybe a sharp edge on it and a handle towards the back end of it. He'd be able to get a grip, but grabs in, reaches, rips it off of the donkey corpse, and then starts tearing through a whole bunch of people with it.
It says the Spirit of the Lord descended upon him. I guess that's the strength.
No, that's the strength. It's strength and fighting ability, speed, endurance, whatever you want to ascribe to that. That is.
Providing the weapon. The
But I
lion.
mean, keep in mind, this man tore a line.
I was going to say,
Tore
the
it
lion didn't have a weapon, but at least killing 1,000 got to providing a weapon.
and maybe short down to fairly easy kill.
It'd have to be a very strong bone to kill
He appears to be vulnerable to women.
people.
Yeah.
That fall apart.
Well, I mean, after a while, maybe, I don't know, maybe it disintegrated like you, even if it was just over, isn't like brass knuckles or something like that, or just, you know, a
Silly question.
punch knife or something.
My mind.
Well, I know, but
But I think that's why it made reference to it was a wet or fresh, because it still had the strength in it, as opposed to the one that had laid in the sun for a year or something like that and got brittle.
yes, sir.
So if it was a fresh job, wouldn't that violate the Nazarite?
It would, yeah, if you ripped right into it. And I don't know what kind of leniency God would give him in that kind of a situation. God has empowered him to seek justice on the Philistines here. I don't think it would be fair to say that God winks at that kind of a sin, as we see described in the New Testament with some of the pagan people on there. But either way, he was headed towards breaking that vow anyway. If it wasn't now, it was going to be eventually, because
I
he's
don't
not.
think Samson really cares if he's breaking vows. He's acting on.
We're
his
not given any kind of insight that he
care.
cares. No, not. I mean, especially in the next chapter.
He wants
It's,
what he wants.
the next chapter is all prostitution, and so, and then Delilah. So no, he's not a moral. He's like a politician or something like that. He's a great leader. We don't look to him for moral answers on a lot of things. Verses 18 through 20. And he was sore athirst, and called on the Lord, and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst, and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? But God clave an hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And when he had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof En-Hakkore, which is in Lehi unto this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So just like anybody would be after killing heaps and heaps of men with nothing but a jawbone, Samson was thirsty. And he cried out to God in this great thirst and exhaustion, and he said, I've been given such a great victory here. Am I really going to die of thirst now and then just faint over here and have the Philistines gather me up anyway? And then we run into an interesting bit of translation in verse 19. It says, God clave an hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And a lot of people take that to mean that the jawbone that Samson had just threw down was used by God, where maybe God took out a tooth cavity, a hollow place within this jawbone, and it just started filling up and spitting out water, and God turned a jawbone into Samson's own little personal sports bottle, and he's drinking out of a jawbone. The problem with that is that the name of the place is Ramoth Lehi. You remember I said, remember that. Ramoth means the lifting up, and Lehi means jawbone. So the place has already in this chapter been referred to as just Lehi. In verse 14, it says, they came unto Lehi. So this place is being called the jawbone. So a much better translation would be that God brought forth a spring from Lehi, from the jawbone. Not from a discarded jawbone, the actual physical jawbone, but from the place called the jawbone. Like water from a rock, which God has already done more than once. So either way, Samson drank and was restored. Possible it was from an actual jawbone? Yes. More likely, I think, that it was from the place called jawbone and that God made a hollow within Lehi, the place called jawbone, and Samson drank from it. And when that happened, he gave the place another name as well, En-Hakkore, which means the spring of the crier, referring to Samson himself, who cried out to God in thirst, and God heard him. And then Samson went on to judge Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years, and we can only imagine the kind of mischief he got into over 20 years. I don't imagine the cycle of vengeance here stopped, and he had not freed the people from Philistine oppression. He seemingly is continuing to be a thorn in the side of the Philistines, because in the next couple chapters, they keep sending people out to try and kill him. They send out Delilah eventually to try and learn the secret to his strength. So who knows what happened over those 20 years while he was judging Israel? I would love to know, but we're not told. And that's how the chapter ends.
Candy, of course, when I have a procedure done today, which